The snow whipped across the barren plains, sharp as knives against the cheeks of those who stood gathered in the dusty yard of the county courthouse. A frail woman clutched her child to her chest, her face streaked with tears, her voice trembling with desperation as she cried out into the cold air, "Please, don't take my child away!" Her shawl was thin, worn down by too many winters, and her eyes bore the hollow look of someone who had lost too much already. Beside her, the boy clung tighter to her waist, his little face pressed against the folds of her dress. Too young to understand the weight of the decision being made, but old enough to feel the terror in his mother's body. The men around her shifted uncomfortably, their hats low, their eyes avoiding hers. No one wanted to meet her gaze. No one wanted to be the one who would tell her she had nothing left to give, no land, no money, no security. And so, the law was ready to do what hunger and hardship already had. It was ready to take her son from her. If you believe no mother should ever be separated from her child, and if you believe in kindness, compassion, and second chances, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to The Gentle Truth. Your support helps keep these powerful human stories alive. The widow's name was Clara, and she had known hardship since the day her husband never came home from the cattle drive 2 years ago. Left with nothing but a one-room shack, a child, and debts she could not pay, she had worked herself raw in fields and kitchens, sewing for neighbors, trading what little she had for bread. But in the eyes of the court, none of it mattered. They said her boy needed a home, food, and stability. They said a child could not thrive in the arms of a mother who could barely keep herself alive. Clara fell to her knees, clutching the boy, as if her hands alone could fight off the judgment of the world. The silence stretched painfully until the sound of heavy boots broke through the storm. A tall man, broad-shouldered, his face shadowed beneath the brim of his hat, stepped forward from the edge of the crowd. He had been there the whole time, leaning against the post as though the matter was not his to interfere in, but now his steady stride cut through the snow like an answer. The townsfolk turned, whispers rising among them. Everyone knew the rancher. He was a man of few words, a man who lived miles out where the land rolled wild and unbroken, a man who carried grief in the set of his jaw and loss in the stillness of his eyes. He was the silent one, the one who rarely came into town except when necessity called. And yet, here he was, stepping closer to the widow, kneeling in the snow. The judge's hand froze in midair, the order unsigned. All eyes fixed on the rancher. Clara lifted her head, her lips trembling, unsure if she should hope. The man didn't speak at first. He simply looked at her and the boy, and in his gaze was something stronger than pity. It was recognition, as if he had once stood in that same snow, facing the same kind of loss. Then, in a voice that was low, steady, and unshakable, he said the words that would change everything. "The boy stays with his mother. I'll see to it they don't go hungry again." It wasn't a plea, it wasn't an argument. It was a vow. And though the judge hesitated, the murmur of townsfolk grew, and no one was willing to challenge the rancher's word. He had land, cattle, and more wealth than most. If he said he would provide, then no one could deny it. Clara's knees gave out, and she nearly fell into the snow, clutching her boy as relief and disbelief crashed over her. The rancher extended a hand, rough and calloused, but steady as stone, lifting her gently to her feet. From that day forward, life began to shift in ways Clara could not have imagined. The rancher, whose name was Samuel, kept true to his word. He brought them to his land, not with the coldness of charity, but with a quiet respect that made Clara feel like more than a burden. The house, once silent and haunted by Samuel's own loneliness, began to stir with the sounds of a child's laughter, the soft hum of Clara's voice as she worked, and the crackle of the hearth that burned warmer than it had in years. For the first time since her husband's death, Clara felt the tight grip of fear loosening from her heart. But life was not without its shadows. Samuel carried his own scars. His wife had been taken by fever, and his children lay in the earth not far from the homestead. He had built walls around his grief, walls no one had dared to breach. Yet in the evenings, when Clara's boy would fall asleep beside the fire and she would sit silently sewing by lamplight, Samuel found himself looking at them with something that felt dangerously like hope. Slowly, gently, trust began to weave itself between them, not forced, not rushed, but like the spring thaw after a bitter winter. The townsfolk, who once whispered about the poor widow's fate, began whispering anew about the strange providence of it all. A woman who had been on the edge of losing everything had found shelter in the most unlikely place, and a man who had sworn never to let anyone into his heart again found himself unable to walk past the sound of her laughter without feeling the ache of something returning to life inside him. Through storms, through hard work on the land, through nights when fear still threatened to creep into Clara's dreams, Samuel was there, never overbearing, but always steady. And in return, Clara brought light back into a house that had long been dim. Together, without saying the words, they began to build something neither had thought they would ever have again. A family born not of blood, but of choice, kindness, and the will to keep going. And so, when the spring sun finally broke across the plains, warming the earth and calling life back to the land, Clara stood in the yard watching her son run across the grass with Samuel at his side. Her heart swelled with gratitude that words could never contain. The memory of that day in the snow still haunted her, but it also reminded her of the power of one choice, one act of mercy, one silent man stepping forward when no one else dared. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to The Gentle Truth. Your support helps us continue to bring you stories of kindness, second chances, and the resilience of the human spirit. Special request: tell us in the comments, what moment in your life reminded you that kindness can change everything?